Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Hello, this is MEG first question paper which was set for the candidates who appeared in term and examination June 2021. Now your first question is, attempt with reference to the context any two of the following. Your first part is, as virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, whilst some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now, and some say no. These are the opening lines taken from the poem A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. Donne wrote this poem for his wife Anne More either in 1611 or 1612 before he left on a trip to France. In these lines, the poet creates a scene of death and says that virtuous men pass away gently because they are not afraid of death. Dying men whisper to their souls to depart as they know the terms of the world. Their sad friends around their beds wish that they should live here for some more time, while others do not want them to die at all. For complete summary of this poem, you can visit MEG First playlist video 19. Next part is, say heavenly muse, shall not thy sacred vein afford a present to the infant God? These lines have been taken from the poem On the Morning of Christ's Nativity written by John Milton in 1629. The poem was published in 1645 in his collection poems of Mr. John Milton. In this poem, the poet celebrates his 21st birthday and in commemoration of the Nativity of Jesus. In these lines, the poet rhetorically addresses the heavenly muse, if the muse of heaven has something to give to the child. Muse in Greek mythology was goddess who preside over the arts and science. The poet asks for a song, a hymn to welcome infant God, that is Christ. Look at the next part. Shut the door, good John, fair teased. I said, type the knocker, say I'm sick, I'm dead. The dog's door raised, nay, it's past a doubt. All Bedlam or Parnassus is let out, fire in each eye and papers in each hand. They rave, recite and meddle round the land. These are the opening lines taken from the poem Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot, written by Alexander Pope in 1734. The poem is a reply to Dr. Arbuthnot when he suggested Pope to be careful while satirizing and attacking other poets. In these lines, Pope orders John, a servant, to shut the door because he is feeling exhausted and is afraid of letting in the poets, whom he calls dogs. He then commands John to tie the knocker of the door. He thinks that the mental institutions like Bedlam and Parnassus are let loose in their road. He finds the poets with papers in their hands and fire in their eyes. They shout and recite angrily around the land. Next stanza is, he did not wear his scarlet coat, for blood and wine are red, and blood and wine were on his hands, when they found him with the dead, the poor dear woman who he loved, and murdered in her bed. These are the opening lines taken from the poem The Ballad of Reading Gaol, written by Oscar Wilde in 1897. The poem is an experience of his imprisonment in Reading Gaol when he was sentenced to 2 years hard labor in prison. These lines take us directly to the scene of the murder. The poet describes how Wooldridge was found with his wife. Wooldridge did not wear his scarlet coat because he had taken off his Royal Horse Guards uniform before committing this crime. When he was found with the dead, he had blood and wine on his hands. The poor woman was loved and murdered in the same bed. Look at question number 2. Would you agree that the Amorti sonnets by Spenser are replete with images of sensuality? Provide a detailed answer covering the poet, his beloved, and the age during which he wrote. Replete here means filled with, and sensuality means sexual pleasure. The term Amorti is literally defined as little loves or little cupids. Amorti is a series of love sonnets written by Edmund Spenser and dedicated to Elizabeth Boyle. They got married in 1594. Elizabeth was estimated to be young, perhaps no more than 18, when she married Edmund Spencer. The rhyme scheme for these sonnets is ABAB, BCBC, CD EE. These sonnets deal largely with the idea of love. Up to sonnet 67, the sonnets primarily focus on the frustration of unreturned romantic desires. But the sonnets that follow sonnet 67 celebrates the happiness of love shared between Spencer and Elizabeth. Though the Amati sonnets are replete with sensual images, like in sonnet 77, love in Spencer is not erotic or lustful. Spencer is not concerned with the pleasures of sensuality. He disapproves of sensual indulgence, which can reduce a man to a beast and lead him up to a state of degradation. For complete summary of Amati sonnets, you can visit MEG First playlist video 9. Look at question number 3. Attempt a critical appreciation of any one of the following poems. First is A Nocturnal upon St. Lucy's Day. It is a metaphysical poem written by John Donne in 1617 after the death of his wife Anne More. The poem was published in 1617. The poem has 5 stanzas and each stanza consists of 9 lines. The poem revolves around the themes of life and death. The poet is so shocked by the death of his wife that he compares his anguish with the atmosphere of St. Lucy's Day. For complete summary of this poem, you can visit MEG First playlist video 20. Next is Redemption. It's a sonnet written by George Herbert and was published in 1633 in his collection of poems The Temple. It's a 14-line sonnet with rhyme scheme as ABAB, CD EFFE, GG. Redemption in Christianity means being forgiven for one's sins. In the poem, the poet desires for a new beginning. The poet portrays himself as a tenant and wishes to cancel his lease for a new, cheaper one. For complete summary of this poem, you can visit MEG First playlist video 27. Third poem is The Garden. The poem is written by Andrew Marvell and was published in 1681. The poem is written in 9 stanzas having 8 lines in each stanza. The poem follows the rhyme scheme of AABB CCDD. The poet in the poem praises quietness and innocence and appreciates the gift that nature offers. He criticizes the devotion of men to public life, war, and politics. He praises the beauty of the garden, the fruits and shade it provides. For complete summary of this poem, you can visit MEG First playlist video 30. Look at question number 4. Would you agree that Puritanism influenced Milton's life? Attempt an answer based on your understanding of the works you have studied. Puritanism was a religious reform movement in the late 16th and 17th centuries. Milton was a child of both the Renaissance and the Reformation. His childhood was spent at a time when the Renaissance dominated literature, and his youth witnessed the rise of Puritanism. His early works, written during his college days, are his experimental works and have little significance, but in the Ode on the Morning of Christ's Nativity, Milton blended Renaissance and Reformation elements. In Il Penseroso, we see Puritanism when the goddess of melancholy is described as a pensionum, cum pensionum, devout and pure, sober, steadfast and demure. We also see Puritanism in Lycidas when Milton discusses death and the sorrow it brings, but finds life only in the later. Weep no more, woeful shepherds, weep no more, for Lycidas your sorrow is not dead. Your next question is, discuss Mac Philippno as a mock heroic poem. Mock heroic works are typically satires or parodies that mock common classical stereotypes of heroes and heroic literature. Now talking about the poem, Mac Philippno is a satire or a mock heroic poem written by John Dryden and published in 1682. The poem is an attack on Thomas Shadwell, who, according to Dryden, was dull at poetry. Their cause of enmity was not only literary backgrounds but also political ones. Mac Philippno in the poem is Richard Feligno, whom the poet calls the reigning king of dull poetry. Feligno is now about to resign and wants Shadwell to succeed him. Feligno, in his speech, humorously relates that he has always waged war against wit, but Shadwell's terrible poetry easily surpassed his poetry. In the end, Shadwell becomes the new king of dull poetry. Look at question number 6. Write a detailed answer on Coleridge's contribution to poetry and literature. Coleridge was Wordsworth's close estate, and the lyrical ballads of 1798 were their joint product. Coleridge produced mainly 3 types of poetry: personal, political, and romantic. Some of his personal poems are Frost and Midnight, The Aeolian Harp, An Ode to Dejection, Youth and Age, War Without Hope, and This Lime Tree Bore My Prison. Some of his famous political poems are France, An Ode, Ode on the Departing Year. His 3 romantic and supernatural poems are The Rime of Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan, and Christabel. He wrote a number of articles for the Morning Post between 1799 to 1802. Now it is question number 7. Comment on the Pre-Raphaelite treatment of women based on your reading of My Sister's Sleep and The Blessed Damozel. In My Sister's Sleep, Dante Gabriel Rossetti describes the lost moments of a dying girl's life through the narration of her brother. The poem explores different emotions and reactions to the death of a loved one. In The Blessed Damozel, the theme of the poem is undying love. Even though the death of one woman has separated her from the man she loves, the love between them as well as the hope that one day they will reunite in heaven lives on. She asks God and wants to learn whether it is true that the strength of 2 lovers is perfect. In both the poems, the woman has been shown frail, weak, weeping, pining, swooning, or dying. Look at question number 8. Are poetry, feminine beauty, and love related to each other in Adamus Curse? Comment. In the poem Adamus Curse, the poet talks about poetry, feminine beauty, and love. It explores the idea that beauty, including art and love, doesn't come naturally to people. It is the product of hard work. At first, the speaker argues that poetry is much more difficult than it seems. But talking to his 2 companions, they agree that poetry, beauty, and love do not come naturally. All need hard work, all need sacrifice, and all are not rewarded at the end. Thus, poetry, feminine beauty, and love are related to each other in Adamus Curse. Look at question number 9. Why is Locke known as an uncommon poet for the common man? Attempt a detailed discussion based on your reading of his works. An uncommon poet for the common man because his poems are at once deeply personal and social commentary. In his poems, he points out that even the ordinary and mundane aspects of life have their charm. In Locke's scheme of thought, the imagination doesn't seem to have much importance because he believes in coming face to face with the plainness, the hard realities of life. His poetry is simply to keep children from TV sets and the old man from his pub.